Hello, good evening, and welcome to Kunsampayo Chuling. We're so happy to have you, and we're happy to be sharing a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. These teachings have been given over the last, 40 years, and all seem to be relevant every minute of the time I've ever listened to them. So enjoy. This one is entitled, How Desire Blocks Happiness. So welcome. We will begin.
So, in keeping with the Christmas season, which in spirit and traditionally and theoretically should be and can be a time of joy and giving and sharing and all those warm fuzzy things that we associate with the season. And it certainly can be a time of celebration and real generosity. Actually, we find that this season is often cornerstoned by greed, and it's become so commercialized that we hardly realize it, we hardly recognize it. I remember enjoying Christmas much more when I was younger, and I think the reason why was because I didn't have to be aware of what it took to make Christmas come together. You know, I'm sure all of you parents can recognize that. What it takes to make Christmas come together is basically get lots of money together and buy. And that seems to be what it takes. Everybody's got a list. I have two older children. One is 21 and the other is 18. And although they're somewhat less awful at that than many young people are, I am aware that often young people will say, well, I want this brand, this size from this store, and I want you to go over to this store and get me this brand and this size, and it's very, you know, it's a very unhappy condition, you know. They can't just say to you, I'd like some clothes, and give you the fun of giving you what you can give them. They have to tell you what brand and what color and what size and that sort of thing. So I think that we're even robbed of the joy of giving it, even though we're the ones that end up having to buy stuff like that. And the buying takes so much time, and it becomes so all-pervasive that we often forget the most important part, which is the feeling of generosity, the feeling that this is a season of sharing, the teaching that the Buddhists have given us. If we celebrate Christmas as a cultural holiday that a Buddhist would celebrate, we would also think that the cornerstone of our religion is generosity and giving, and that you know, this could be a time when we could practice the most important meat and bones part of our religion. We could be really generous, but it doesn't seem to happen. It's just become too materialistic. I think that that is a perfect example of some of the problems that we have as sentient beings. As sentient beings, we have this mistaken idea that we can satisfy ourselves through very gross materialistic means. And we can't even see through the falsity of that idea. We can't really understand how it is that we're fooling ourselves, that we're duping ourselves. And we never seem to understand why in the end we are never completely satisfied, do we? We never really understand what has fallen through. Why is it that we're never happy And why is it that we're never completely satisfied? Or if we are happy, why does it not last? Why is that so? I think about the strange mental configurations that we can get into. It's really odd. You know, depending on what kind of person you are, each one of us will express this mental configuration in a different way. Here are some of the ways that I can think of just off the top of my head. Let's say, for instance, that we are eating some food. Well, you know, you might eat something that's very rich and meaty, and then after that you have to have something that's very light and sparkly to cleanse your mouth. And then after eating something rich and spicy, then you have to have something sweet and mellow. And then you think that if you've had something salty, then you must have something very liquidy and smooth to drink. And it goes back and forth, and you must constantly build on what you have given yourself to complete the experience. Have you ever noticed that that's true? Have you ever noticed that if you were to eat, for instance, some meat at a meal, then after that you would have to have something sweet? Or if you ate something salty, then after that you would have to have something cool and refreshing. And then if you ate something cool and refreshing, then you'd have to have something salty. And it's an endless cycle of things that you have to do that is based one on top of the other. It's almost like a reactive phenomena that is circular and cycled almost in its shape. And then let's say we go to the store and we see a dress that we absolutely must have. It's a must-have. It's a beautiful dress. It's a beautiful dress and we try it on and it fits us perfectly. Or if we're a man, it's a beautiful suit and it fits us perfectly. And, you know, I can relate more to the women's dressing aspect. But anyway, if it's a dress, well, you have to have the perfect shoes. And of course, if you have to have the perfect shoes, then you must have the perfect hose. And of course, if you have the perfect hose, then you must have nice underwear to go under it. And of course, if that's the case, you must figure out exactly how to do your hair properly to make it just right for that dress. And then what are the accessories that you're going to use? Well, the only earrings that you found that are just perfect are going to cost you about $150. So in order to make that practical, you have to buy another dress that they go with. Two dresses for $150 pair of earrings? No. I've got that skirt and that blouse would make it practical. They would make it worthwhile. But then for each one of them, you have to have shoes and hose. Well, pretty soon it gets awfully darned complicated, doesn't it? And you find that it never ends, because every time you put a piece together, there has to be another piece. Or with relationships. You always think, well, if I could just find that perfect relationship, I could be happy. And then you find a relationship and you talk yourself into believing that it's perfect. Maybe it seems perfect at first. And then suddenly there comes that first horrible day when you notice there's a flaw. You try not to think about it, but it's really there. You try not to think about it, but it's creeping up on you, and pretty soon you notice that it's not perfect. And the moment that it's not perfect, you fall through the cracks again, don't you? Because little by little, that lack of perfection is going to build up. And if your mind is not stable, pretty soon it won't be the one. And if it's not the one, then you're on the track again, looking. It's always like that. It's always like that. It can happen with material objects. It can happen with relationships. It can happen with ways that you spend your day. It can happen with jobs. It can happen with ideas. And the thing that we always come out understanding is that nothing is perfect. We're never completely content. There is no perfect relationship. None. There is no perfect object. None. There is no perfect circumstance. None. There is no perfect idea. None. Because each idea, each object, each relationship can only be perceived by us according to the karmic patterns and habitual tendencies of our mind. We will create the kinds of relationships in our mind that are our habit to create, according to our karma. And we will not even be able to register those that are inconsistent with the karmic cause and effect relationships within our minds, with the habitual tendencies that are within our minds. We will not even be able to cook up a relationship that isn't part of the habitual tendency of your mind, of our minds. That's why they're all alike. That's why even though some relationships seem different and some people seem different, our friends and our experiences within the context of relationships eventually all have a certain common denominator. They have a common denominator in some regard. They are the same. They leave us in the same way. They affect us in the same way. And it's due to the fact that we cannot even perceive a relationship that is not part of the habitual tendency of our mind. That is what we are doing. We are looking in the mirror and seeing the habitual tendency of our mind. And it's the same way with any object that we have ever owned. They all have a certain common denominator. They all excite us for a period of time, and then they leave us. They either get old, or they break down, or they're no longer in fashion, or whatever it is that happens. I don't know how many times that I have people come to me and they say, gosh, I'm so excited about this path. I would love to practice this path. It seems so wonderful. I'm so excited about this path. But, you know, that's like me. I always get really excited about things, and I jump into them, and I get really on fire, and then I burn out real quick. But maybe this one is different. This could be it. Well, you know, that's the example that I can give you, that I see again and again and again. But people are like that about everything. Whenever we get a new object, we get real excited about it, or we become attached to it, and we think this is going to be the thing that makes us happy. And it isn't. Or we get a new relationship and we just get all in love and in friendship and whatever it is, enamored, and then we think, oh, this is going to be the one that makes the difference. And then, well, it does, but it isn't. It really isn't. What are we actually seeing? First of all, we're actually seeing the faults of cyclic existence. What begins must end. What goes up must come down. What causes us to be supremely elated must also cause disappointment. What comes together must result in separation. That is the fault of cyclic existence. That is its quality. We're seeing the reflection of the condition of cyclic existence, but more than that, we are seeing the reflection of our own mind. Our own mind. Our own mind has within it the karma, or cause and effect setup, if you will, to be able to experience that kind of thing again and again and again. That is our habitual tendency. We are suffering from a kind of inflammation of the mind. The mind is inflamed. Interestingly, the very thing that causes us to be so inflamed by some new toy, you know, some new relationship, some new thing that comes into our life, some new event, some new job, some new spiritual path, some new idea, something, you know, that comes into our mind that causes us to be so, oh gosh, everything's going to be different now. So breathlessly excited. Everything that comes into our mind like that. That quality of inflammation, and it is like an inflammation, isn't it? Become all puffed up and red like inflammation. That quality of inflammation is the same quality that will actually lead to the downfall of that particular circumstance to satisfy us. Because that very inflammation is an indication of the instability of our minds. Our minds are so unstable. They are so inflamed, so on fire. With what? With excitement, with the idea that something's going to happen for us. With what are we inflamed with? According to the Buddhist teachings, we are actually inflamed with desire. Desire, I want, and I'm going to have it. I'm going to get it. I'm finally going to get it. The excitement that you feel when you've got that dress, and those shoes, and those stockings, and those $150 earrings, all of it together. That same excitement. is the inflammation that you feel when you've got the dress, but you haven't got the shoes yet, and you want them so bad you can taste them. It's the same thing. It's an inflammation. It's like a fever. And no one can ever be happy, no matter what, while they've got that fever in their minds. Because it isn't the satisfaction of that fever that composes happiness. That isn't what makes happiness. In fact, in cyclic existence, there ain't no such thing. You can't satisfy that fever. That fever is the symptom. It is the problem. Satisfying that fever would be like treating a physical fever by heating up the room to be the same temperature. Think about it. It doesn't work. Temporarily, you may feel strangely like there's not much difference between the heat in your body and the heat in the room. I don't really know how it would affect you physically, but I do know this: it won't cure the fever. The fever ends when the fever ends, when it subsides. Now here's where the analogy ends, because in an ordinary fever, if the fever doesn't kill you, eventually it will naturally subside. It will naturally calm down. The body will rally itself to create a cure. It will come to its own defense. But in fact, the Buddha teaches us that cyclic existence will not naturally cure itself. We must take steps. Here's why. Because in cyclic existence, we're busy buying those shoes and those earrings. We're busy finding the first perfect relationship and convincing ourselves that it's going to work, or ditching it and finding another one when it doesn't. We're busy suffering the disappointment of watching things that have come together fall apart. We're busy going through what we have always gone through, the ups and downs of cyclic existence. Just the cycle of death and rebirth, up and down, happy and sad, high and low, hot and cold. We're busy doing that. And every single time we hit a certain point, whether it be high or low, at that point we are creating more cause and effect relationships and more habitual tendencies within our mind. Specifically this: let's say we buy the dress. We want the dress so bad, and we buy the dress. Let's say now we want the shoes so bad we can taste them. Or in the case of men, maybe it might be, let's say he's a drummer and he bought himself one drum and he's got to have the other one to make that other set. Let's say that's the case. He's just got to have it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. He can taste it. It's just in him so bad. So let's say that we have the one object and we've got to have its complement. We want it so bad. Well, first of all, there's no satisfaction there, and here's the reason why. In getting the object in the first place, we've reinforced an old and very bad habit of ours. We saw something, we accepted it at face value, we took a lot of energy to secure that thing, we grasped at it, and we got it. We strengthened that habitual tendency. We strengthened it. And then, of course, what was the result of that? Result of that was you had to have more, because that habitual tendency has been strengthened. So now we've got to have the shoes. Okay, now we're going to go for the shoes. Save up lots of money, buy this big pair of shoes. Well, hopefully they're not too big. Buy this great pair of shoes. They're really expensive. They're really beautiful. They're perfect for the dress. And now you have to go through this whole thing of making it practical for yourself. Now you've got to go through so much. So much. And in doing so, you have substantiated, you have reinforced, you have continued the cause and effect relationships within your mind that cause you to look at things on a superficial level, to reach out, to grasp for them. It continues the inflammation of desire. So even though you might have everything that you can think of, the habit of desire and the inflammation are still there. They're still there. How is that going to happen? What's going to result in that? You'll think of more. You'll think of more. You are endlessly creative. Always have been. Endlessly creative. You will think of more. And maybe you'll satisfy yourself by thinking that, well, okay, I'm not on clothes right now. So now you think of something else. Think of something else that you must have, a certain kind of happiness, even if it's a certain kind of mental state. I don't know what it's going to be next to you, but it will be something. You'll think of more. What is the end of it? Where does it end? It ends when you take yourself in hand and begin to practice stabilizing the mind. The Buddha teaches us that the cause of all suffering, every part of it, no matter what it is, if you trace it down to its root, is desire. How can you kick desire? Everybody's got desire. You have the desire for life itself, don't you? I mean, you don't want to die or anything. You have the desire to be happy. All sentient beings have the desire to be happy. That's one thing that we share. Do you realize that? We share with every life form that there is. All sentient beings have their common familyhood, brother and sisterhood. They all wish to be happy. They're all doing it in different ways, but we all wish to be happy. We have that desire and we are inflamed with it. How can we reduce that inflammation? It's like we have to step off the conveyor belt. You know what I'm saying? We have to step off the merry-go-round that just makes us want and fulfill and want and keep trying to fulfill and keep doing that round and round and round and round and round endlessly. It's like you just have to stop for a minute, step off of it, and look at what you're doing. Look at the habit pattern. Look at the pattern. Just look at it. This is sometimes more difficult for younger people to do because they just honestly haven't lived long enough to see their patterns. For people that have reached maturity, it's much easier to see the quality of the relationships and friendships that you have had. It's much easier to see the level of fulfillment that you have had from material goods. It's much easier to understand that you have been going through the same thing since you can remember. For younger people, it's more difficult, but for older people, it's very obvious. And the people that it's the easiest for is the people that are coming to the end of their life, that have reached an advanced age or an elderly age, and at that point, they are carrying, perhaps hidden inside of them, a disappointment. There are things that we become very disappointed about. Things that have just not come together, that we always assumed would. We always thought that they would. When we come to that fantastic point where the old gig, the old game doesn't work for us anymore, we become disillusioned. It's a heartbreaking time in one way, isn't it? It's really heartbreaking. It's hard to bear, hard to face. But you know something? It's the best time for you, the best time that you have ever experienced. Until you have come to that moment, you really haven't been born yet. You're like an egg, you know, just revolving around in your little shell. Kind of a big yolk, haha. Hey, that was pretty good, you have to admit. Little levity there to cheer you up in the middle of your suffering. But anyway, the revolving around inside your shell and not getting anywhere. The moment that you become dissatisfied and panicky because your gig isn't working anymore, terrified because it may never work, uptight because you don't know what to do next, grieving because nothing's ever worked. At that moment, when you feel like you're about to have a nervous breakdown, you're on your way, kid. It's probably the best and most mature moment of your life. Because you have to come to that moment to get anywhere. You can't do this while you're on the merry-go-round. You can't do this unless you fall apart a little bit. You can't get the big picture. You have to see the faults of cyclic existence. You have to look at it square on. You must look at cause and effect relationship in the eye. And you've got to say, really face one very sad fact about cyclic existence. No matter what we accumulate during the course of our lives, we can't take even so much as a sesame seed with us. None of it. We can't take relationships with us. We can't take objects with us. We can't take even ideas with us. Those things that we spend so much time building up. We certainly can't take emotions with us. And how much time do we spend watching our emotions and reacting to them? We can't take any of that with us. We take one thing with us: the condition of our mind streams, our own habitual tendencies. And if we have the habit of grasping, trying to satisfy ourselves to the exclusion of virtuous living, and then being disappointed, that is the habit, that is the content of our mind stream that we will take with us into the intermediate state and into our next rebirth. The habits of our mind stream. That is what we take with us. So we have a problem here. We really have to get off the merry-go-round and we have to look at things square in the eye. And there's no getting away from it. One of the problems of cyclic existence is that we can't see very clearly. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that even once we make the decision to live a virtuous life and to think as I've just described, then we sit there and we think hatefully in our minds, we think hateful thoughts in our minds, and we think jealous thoughts in our minds, we think competitive thoughts in our minds, we think judgmental thoughts in our minds, we think I want, we think all of these things, angry, vengeful, whatever it is. And we think because no one else can hear it besides us, that it's really okay. So long as we can maintain a beatific exterior, a sweet kind of exterior. So long as we do that, we're okay. Isn't that true? Don't you think that's true? Well, the difficulty is you can't even take your smile with you. So when you go into the bardo, what will be there is what's behind it. The habit of your mind, the habit of hatred or ignorance or grasping. One of the prayers, one of the great bodhisattva prayers that I've read, and every time I hear it, it brings tears to my eyes, is because it's so true. It translates to roughly like this: if it is true that I cannot even take as much as one sesame seed with me when I die, why not offer all that I have to the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings? Why not do that? I'm going to lose it anyway. Reminds me a little bit of the old trick of knowing that pretty soon you're going to have to pay this enormous amount of taxes because you sold a house, so you quick got to buy another one. It's kind of like that. You know you're going to lose it anyway. Why not make it something useful? On this path, there are many different ways to do that. One can become a renunciate, as these monks and nuns are renunciates. And believe me, once you put on these robes, that does not mean that you have renounced cyclic existence. It means that you are trying. Sometimes I catch these guys not renouncing cyclic existence. Just every now and then, I catch them clinging to cyclic existence. Like you can't believe. But you can try. You can really try to practice in that way where you actually renounce cyclic existence and you take a certain form, you take an outward appearance and you practice inwardly according to that outward appearance. In other words, they wear only the Buddha's robes most of the time, and they practice the Buddha's teachings, and they don't drink, and they don't they remain celibate, and they don't lie, and there are many different exterior kinds of vows that they take, but they also try to practice within their heart in a very pure way. And then you can also practice as a lay person who looks very ordinary and who engages in the ordinary activities of life with the ordinary trappings that sentient beings engage in. But inside you would practice like certain kinds of meditation, particularly you might think of practicing stabilizing the mind through meditation, that is, letting thoughts come to the mind, thoughts of grasping or thoughts of hatred, and allowing those thoughts to merely dissolve. And there are certain techniques and technologies that you can apply to actually doing that. Or practicing in such a way as to generate oneself as the deity and see as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and in doing that, generate one's environment as the celestial palace. And that being the celestial palace, it has only pure qualities. And therefore, having only pure qualities, there is nothing to grasp onto. So that you might have or not have something. You might be married or not be married. You might have children, you might not have children. You might have objects or you might not have objects. But at any rate, each one of these objects is seen as an emanation of the enlightened quality of the Buddha, and it's nothing to grasp onto. It's nothing to hold on to. It's nothing that you would call mine. You see what I'm saying? So it's an inner kind of more subtle practice. There are many different ways to practice on this path. There's many different ways as there are people. But it starts with that little breakdown. Getting off that merry-go-round, looking at yourself and seeing the faults of cyclic existence and seeing that you have never yet been satisfied by it. And seeing that it's time to pacify that inflammation within the mind. The inflammation is the problem. This teaching is very difficult to understand unless you can apply some direct technology, unless you can really get into some substantial practice. And if you wish to do so, you should keep coming to the temple, and at some point you should ask about entering into deeper practice. This is just a practice meant to display some of the meaning of the path to those who are not practicing so deeply at this point, or who are not practicing Buddhism actually, and also increasing the understanding of those who are practicing Buddhism. But there is a technology that must be applied that would be beneficial. If one were to simply try to understand what I have said in this way, if one were to say, okay, I guess what she means is I can't get excited about anything anymore, or I can't feel really happy and really high, or I should just like make myself really passive, then you would not be understanding what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you should adapt a mask of stillness. I'm not saying that you should force yourself to roll your eyes ever skyward and appear beatific and holy from this point on. That would be a farce. That would be silly. In fact, that's a very neurotic way to act, and I wouldn't recommend it at all. You might think that what I'm saying that you should do is act very spiritual and very sweet and very kindly when in your heart there's a raging fire. And I'm not saying that. That's a very neurotic way to do, and that will cause you to take Valium very quickly. That is not the method. Valium is not the method on this path. There is a technology that one must apply, and there are many different ways to enter into that technology. One can start simply with generosity, and one doesn't even have to be a Buddhist to do that. Generosity is a very good starting place. As I taught the children, at Christmas time, for instance, we think very much of getting, what am I going to get? Am I going to get everything I want? And if I'm not, will I have enough money left over to get everything I want? And I'm just wondering about getting. We all think about that. And then we think about giving to our children and to our families and to our friends, but that's another form of getting, isn't it? In a sense, sometimes it becomes a little bit distorted, and it becomes, how much can I give to my family and friends? And it's like another kind of greed, but it's like backsided greed. It's a reinforcement of one's ego, in a sense. How can I do this? How can I do this? So there's a little trick to that too. At this season, as well as any time, perhaps an antidote to that would cause the inflammation that we're all feeling right now to calm down, And by the way, that inflammation is why it becomes less and less possible to really enjoy Christmas or any season, is to practice true generosity, truly wishing for the benefit of sentient beings. If we think about what will really make others happy, is it the objects that we are giving them? Is that going to make them happy? If we get them everything they want, in every size they want, in every color they want, in every name brand they want, from every store they want, is that going to do it for them? Are they really going to get happy that way? No. You've been through Christmases before. You know that this is true. Your children are happy for how long before they start acting like themselves again? It's like that. That is not what produces happiness. According to the Buddha, what produces happiness is liberation. What produces happiness is inner peace. What produces happiness is relief from grasping. What produces happiness is the pacification of desire, the pacification of hatred, the pacification of ignorance. That is what produces happiness. How can we give that to sentient beings? Perhaps we can really generate the spirit of giving by beginning to make it a daily practice to pray for the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings, to begin to make wishing prayers even now. One good tool that you could use is that big funny white building that's sort of out there in that direction. It's called a stupa, and it's empowered in such a way with many millions of prayers and mantras and also spiritual relics from those who have attained Buddhahood, actually, and at the time of their death their bodies produced relics. That stupa is filled with such magical, fantastic things as that, created in a very specific, very technical mandala of placement, and empowered in such a way by the head of our lineage, Pena Rinpoche. And we have more stupas across the street that you can make wishing prayers on, and it's the same deal there. Empowered in such a way as to be like the very mind of enlightenment itself. And it is said that if you circumambulate that stupa in a clockwise direction while making wishing prayers for the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings, if you were to do that, that those prayers would come true, and they would be magnified or amplified many, many times, simply by the power and virtue of all the effort that it took to create that stupa, and all the effort that it took for those who produced the relics in that stupa to achieve enlightenment. You can begin to make it a daily practice, not only here, but wherever you are, to make wishing prayers for the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings, such as, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May all sentient beings find the door to liberation. May there be an end to the inflammation of the mind that produces hunger. May there be an end to poverty of spirit and physical poverty in all its forms. May there be no more war. May the name suffering never even be heard in this world. May all sentient beings achieve both temporary and ultimate satisfaction in every conceivable way. We can begin to make those prayers every day now. It's a great way to celebrate Christmas. It's a great way to begin truly the spirit of giving. And what it also does is to antidote that horrible habitual tendency of grasping that we have. That very habitual tendency that makes us so unhappy and makes it impossible for us to never ever have what we need. Because what we need is peace. So the end of suffering ends up to be much different than we thought. You can't get it. You can't buy it. But you can practice it. You can practice it in a peaceful and loving way. Those who have never made wishing prayers before report that when they start making wishing prayers as a general practice, at first they feel a sense of tremendous relief. Like there's a knowing in our minds that this really works. This is something different than I've ever done. I've always looked out for me. I've always wanted for me. I've always gotten excited about what I could have. But I've never really, every day, consistently wished that all sentient beings could be happy. I've never done that. And there's a feeling of joy, you know. But at the same time, people also report that they don't really feel kind like that, that there are some days when they just don't care if everybody else stops suffering. They want what they want. What do you do on days like that? Well, for some people, those days are every day. First of all, let me explain to you why that is. Why that is that you feel like that is that you don't have yet the deep habitual tendency of generosity. You don't have the habit of generosity, and it seems strange to you. It's not that some people are kind and some people are not. It's not like that. It's not that some people are selfish and some people are not. Did you think that that was the case? It seems so, doesn't it? Didn't your mother or your father tell you that you were a selfish little kid? Didn't you grow up believing that about yourself? Didn't you think that you were such that you could only think about what you wanted? It's not true. It's not true. You're not more selfish than the next sentient being, or less. We're the same in that regard. But some of us have more closely cultivated the habit of generosity. It's only a habit. And others, not knowing, have cultivated the habit of self-cherishing. They haven't understood that it only brings them more suffering. They simply haven't understood. So now you can start, and you can create a new habit. And even on the days when you don't feel particularly generous, and you don't really give a flip whether everybody else is suffering or not, you are suffering and you want what you want. Even on those days, even if you have to say it through your teeth, you say, I wish that all suffering would end. You look at your children that you clearly want to throw out of a 6-story window, and you say, I wish that their suffering would end. And then you smile. You may not believe this, but it isn't necessary for you to particularly feel the joy of the moment. Only necessary for you to practice. And eventually you will create the habit of generosity. Little by little, you'll hardly notice it. You'll hardly notice it, but little by little, you'll genuinely find that you are involved in doing what you can to bring about the end of suffering for others. And you will slowly, slowly, almost on an unconscious level, be led to a different life. A really different life, coming from the inside out, according to your practice. So please begin. There's no reason not to begin. You don't have to wait for a religious conversion. You don't have to wait for the right feeling. Don't wait for the right feeling. Because if you have all the wrong feelings, that's an indication that it's time to start cultivating the habit of the right feeling. So you're the one that should start first, now, today, this very, very minute. Don't wait for the right feeling. Don't wait for a religious experience. Just practice kindness now. Just begin. So that's my Christmassy message for today. And I hope that maybe, I know that this is true. I know that if you practice this, it will bring some of the real happiness back into Christmas. You know? Because all you're thinking about now is what you can get and what you can give. And it's just about us, isn't it? It's just about us. Sometimes, times like this, we take stock. This time of year, we take stock. And really what we're taking stock of is what we have. Maybe what we should do is to change our modus operandi. Maybe what we should do is simply to practice generosity and loving kindness and to look out for the welfare of sentient beings. So I think that's the answer. I think that brings us happiness and not the other stuff.
Joy in me is the
Thank you all so much uh, for joining in this tonight. And we're so happy to have you. We do show these teachings in addition to the Wednesdays. We show them on Sunday at 11 a.m., also on YouTube. And we also have meditations here at the temple, Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m., either live in person or on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, we are open now. Oh, thank goodness, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day in the prayer room, which is on the south side of the temple. And you can come in and meditate, pray, join in whatever practice is going on. And in order to find what practices are going on, you can go to tara.org and find our calendar under Meditate, Pray, Study. And that will give you anything you any event that's there. You can click on it and get the online information, or that it's, I mean, in general now they're open. So except for Medicine Buddha, which they broadcast from a variety of locations, and it's on Facebook Live, and that's every evening at 7 p.m. I just realized I was going to just about contradict myself right there. And that's every evening at 7, and it's about 15 minutes, and it's wonderful practice, mostly in English, but of course with a mantra, and created by Jetsunma, specifically for all those times that you just really, really, really need to invoke Medicine Buddha to help yourself or someone you love, or a situation you care about, or whatever. And there's been a lot of that going around, so we hope that you come and use it as often as you wish. And you'll have the support of all the others who've joined in as well. We do a feast offering ceremony called a soak every day, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's at 5:30 in the evening. Thursdays, it's at 5 for scheduling reasons. Sorry about that. And Saturday is at noon. And Sundays is a slightly different location and venue. Sundays is at noon. It's the Riggs and Dupa, and it's live at the it's at the Guru Rinpoche statue live, and if possible, it's on Facebook Live. Most of the time, it will actually stream. Every once in a while, the spirits have their own fun, and we can't get online, but we do as often as we can. So the others are on Zoom, and you can find that Zoom link on that calendar that I mentioned on tara.org, and it's in there in the chat is the link for that. On Sundays also, after the Riggs and Dupa, at about 4 p.m. at the same location at the Guru Rinpoche statue, which is just across the street from the temple at the entranceway where the new statue is, and where they're landscaping like crazy to make it just really, really, really beautiful. And also ecologically sound, I guess is the word I want. I'm not sure what word I want, but to deal with all the runoff water when it rains, to make sure that it doesn't get all pitted from streams running in a bazillion directions, and to make it comfortable and safe for the people who are there. So we will have a rain garden and just all kinds of wonderful things in there. It'll be beautiful. So, but meanwhile, we do it where we have it, and it's there. And at 4 p.m. there's a drum circle, and at the moment we are drumming for rain, and we're using the the Tara mantra. And bring your own drum, bring a chair or a blanket or something to sit on, and you can drum your heart out with everybody, and it's hopefully going to really bring about lots and lots of benefit. It already has, so we know that it works. So meantime, we're so happy to have you, and we're so happy the temple is open, and we really want to see you. So please come on out, and if you can't, please join us online any and as often as you can. So thank you very, very much. Should you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received a teaching from her, you can do that. It's a tradition, and it helps bond you with the teacher. Her PayPal account is Jetsunma Gift, JETSUNMAGIFT @gmail.com, and that's also there in the chat. So you can send it there, and she will get it directly. And my guess is that at the moment she'll be, I mean, she's amazing. She spends thousands of dollars, and just about anything she gets in as offerings, she spends on food for those who need it. The amount of food that goes out from her place and goes out from the temple to a variety of organizations that can distribute it successfully and widely is phenomenal. So join in that and be a part of it, and come on over and help offer to, ferry all of this food back and forth to the places that need it. And yeah, be a part of the generosity. And thank you so much. Anyway, meanwhile, be safe, and we hope to see you soon.